Before we get started, I want to make a special announcement. This is the first ever Shooting Cars review to be filmed outside of the United States. I am here in beautiful Ontario, Canada, which officially marks Shooting Cars going international. Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1997 Ford Thunderbird LX. Up front is a 4.6 liter V8 and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this here Ford Thunderbird for a couple of reasons. Like I mentioned earlier, I am up in Canada today, which is beautiful. But also I've never driven a 10th generation of the Ford Thunderbird. I've done the 1st gen, I've done the 4th gen, and later the 11th gen, but not the 10th. And so I'm excited to get my beak wet today with a good old-fashioned 10th gen from the 90s. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zackpraedel.com, where you can buy stickers and other merchandise when it becomes available. You could also submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form, and you get a video of your car just like this one, no matter where you are in the world. And you could read my behind-the-scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 4.6 liter V8 under the hood. Well, it makes about 205 horsepower, and this is one of Ford's modular V8s. They use the 4.6 in almost everything they touched in the 90s, all the way into the 2000s. We're talking Lincoln Town Car, Crown Vic, and Mercury Grand Marquis, the Panther platforms, of course, but also the Explorer, the Mustang, you name it, they probably put this V8 into it. And so that means that parts availability is very, very easy. They're reliable, they run forever. New York's taxi cabs for over 2 decades ran on these. They're easy to work on. They're not anything crazy. 205 horsepower is, fine for a V8, I guess, but it's a solid workhorse, and that's what I love about it. Now, you could also get this with a V6, and there was the Super Coupe, but unfortunately, this is not it, so we can't talk about that today. Like I said, paired to it, 4-speed automatic transmission, it's fine, it's doing the job, nothing really too insane here. It is a 90s Ford 4-speed, and that's it. Last but not least, however, the Thunderbird is rear-wheel drive, and I say that with such emphasis because I feel like a lot of vehicles that kind of looked this way in this era were front-wheel drive. So it's nice to see that this still retained rear-wheel drive. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a couple of gauges. On the left, I have my fuel and coolant temperature. In the center, I get a speedometer. However, the original speedometer in kilometers an hour broke and the dealer replaced it with an American unit. So this is still at miles per hour, even though we're up in Canada. That's funny to me. But on the far right, I do have my tachometer as well. On the steering wheel, I get this big Thunderbird badge, but also on the steering wheel, I do have cruise control options, which is fantastic. Moving off to the left, I have a climate control vent, my headlight switches, and my dimmer switches. And moving on to the door, I get the power mirrors, power windows, and power locks. U meaning unlock, L meaning lock. I think it's funny that Ford did this back in the day. And this is where you start to notice kind of the interior quality isn't amazing in these cars, but like I said, but similarly to the rest of it, that's across the board. Ford in the 90s didn't have all of the money in the world, and so their interiors are a little bit flimsy. However, I do say this has held up really well for 176,000 miles. This has fared pretty good, and I'm happy to see that. Moving into the center, I get another climate control vent and a clock. And then I get the air conditioning and heating options. This looks almost just tacked in here. Again, shared with a lot of other Ford parts bin vehicles. And I like it. They're nice and simple, easy to see controls, and they work. And that's all that I really care about. Then I do have an aftermarket radio because most radios from the 90s were pretty garbage. And then I get a little cigarette lighter and little pop-out ashtray, and I get a coin holder to hold your loonies and toonies. That's pretty neat. Then I have the shifter itself. This is shared again with a lot of other Ford products. This was a rather parts bin piece. And it works, it operates. I don't really have any major complaints about it. It's not the most expensive thing in the world, but hey, that's okay. Then I do have cup holders, so we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the Ford Thunderbird LX from 1997. And there's this like rubber liner, but if you pull it out, it actually fits the big friggin' bottle. So the 97 Thunderbird passes the big friggin' bottle test, and that means 100% of the vehicles that I've ever filmed in Canada pass the big friggin' bottle test. Everything is bigger in Canada, as they say. Then I do get a center console and the seats. The seats are pretty comfortable. They do have this very 90s pattern on them, which I absolutely love. I think it looks really cool. And the whole interior just has a very retro futuristic feel. Back in the day, this was probably pretty cutting edge with all the sloping lines and cool shapes. But now it's just kind of funny to look back on. I have to say, I really do like it. But speaking of seats, we do have back seats. So let's go do a back seat review. Oh, not as bad as I thought. All right, so we're in the back of the 1997 Ford Thunderbird LX. Not really too much to note back here. I do fit okay back here. I'm actually not complaining too much. Headroom is fine. Knee room is going to be a little bit tough, but hopefully the driver would be nice and move up a little bit. I do get a center console. It's just a big foam cushiony brick like a lot of 90s cars had, so to be expected. I don't get any windows or anything like that. I get little hooks up here. I assume that's for like hanging clothes and stuff for the driver. But nothing crazy, but it does have a back seat. It's a decently usable back seat, and I'm honestly not mad about it. Let's go hop around the very back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, so around the back of the Thunderbird LX, I do have a trunk popper here. There we go. And then you can just pull it up the rest of the way. And you do get a lot of trunk space. This is a very big advantage over the Mustang chassis, is that you get a lot more trunk space. You could fit a full spare wheel in there. This just gets the donut spare, but the owner actually has a full-size spare just in case. Of course, you got to have all your scrapers up here in Canada. You can't go without that. And then, of course, some extra liquids as well, and plenty of extra space if you want to go on like a weekend trip or whatnot. You could easily do that here. Now we got to talk about the looks, and I love the look of the Ford Thunderbird LX. I think it's really, really special. I love this color. I really think the color looks good. And I do want to talk about the wheels for a second. You might be looking at them and saying, hey, those aren't the original wheels. You're right, they're not. These are actually off of a slightly newer Mustang, and unfortunately, the bolt pattern didn't match up, so the owner, Bailey, had to put spacers on so that he could adapt the new wheels. And so these will actually be changed out probably by the time this video comes out. So just so you know, that's why they do poke out a little bit. That's not factory, and that's not staying on the car. However, with all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think finally driving a Ford Thunderbird LX from 1997, a 10th generation Ford Thunderbird? Well, there's some things I like and some things that I don't like. To get it out of the way, I don't really like the interior quality in here, but that's to be said about Ford across the board at this time. Listen to this clip of a Mustang that I took not too long ago. Check it out. Yeah, not fantastic, but that's really the only big downside of this car. It's a rear-wheel drive V8 coupe. Love that about it. But what's more interesting is that this was actually kind of an interesting year. 1997 was the final year for the Ford Thunderbird, a nameplate that had gone back all the way to the 1950s. The Thunderbird was meant to rival the Corvette, and it did so really well with the first gen, and then I drove the fourth gen, and it had this awesome mystique to it, this sort of ambiance and just swagger. And they made them all the way up until this vehicle, until this year, 1997. And so to commemorate the Thunderbird, as the last one rolled off the Ohio assembly plant line, it had an inscription on the back that said, "That's all, folks." And it was. That was the last Thunderbird. A name that had been around for almost 50 years was now gone from Ford's catalog. And I think with it, they took this awesome V8 rear-wheel drive car, this vehicle that has presence. Is this very different than a Mustang? Not really, but it's a little bit bigger, it's comfier, it's more dailyable, it's nice, and I would definitely drive this every day over a same year Mustang, 100%. And it's a shame that it's gone. Well, except it wasn't, because then Ford decided to bring it back in the early 2000s to sort of fit the retro theme that a lot of manufacturers were doing with the Plymouth Prowler and PT Cruiser. And so they brought it back, and it was ugly and not fun, and it kind of lost its sheen. And so to me, in my book, this is the last real Thunderbird. This is the last Thunderbird that had that presence, that was fun to drive, had the big, lopey, lazy V8 up front. I like that characteristic of it. And actually, as I record this video, across the street is another Ford Thunderbird. Look at that. I mean, look at that thing. And look at this. Don't look at this, but look at this. That's cool. That is really special. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Bailey for letting me take out his 1997 Ford Thunderbird LX. This was a great experience, and like I mentioned at the beginning, this marks the beginning of shooting cars going international. So much more to come down the pipeline. Huge thank you to Bailey for giving me the opportunity. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.